Welcome to the Raising Confident Girls podcast, your guide to raising strong, confident daughters. I'm Melissa Jones, the founder of Girls Positivity Club and a teacher for over 20 years. In a world where girls often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and confused, this podcast is your go-to space. As caregivers, we navigate challenges together. I founded Girls Positivity Club to provide a place where you belong and get the tools to face today's hurdles. Consider this your regular check-in with a trusted friend, offering insights and practical tips for meaningful conversations. I'm here to help you feel confident on this journey of raising a generation of empowered girls. Let's dive in and raise those confident girls together. Hey everybody, it's Melissa and welcome back to Raising Confident Girls. Today we are talking about something that shows up quietly for so many girls, and honestly, it can be one of the hardest things for parents to hear. It sounds like, I'm so stupid. I should have done better. I always mess things up. Everyone else is good at this, but me. I'll never be as good as her. Sometimes it comes after a test or practice, sometimes during homework, sometimes late at night when the day finally slows down. And when you hear it, it hits differently because this isn't just frustration, it's how your daughter is talking to herself. And as parents, that can be scary because you want her to feel confident. You want her to be kind to herself. You want her to believe in who she is, especially when things don't go well. But in those moments, you're not always sure what to say that actually helps. You don't want to minimize how she feels. You don't want to jump straight into fixing. And you definitely don't want to accidentally make that inner voice louder. So today I'm sharing 5 things to say when your daughter is being really hard on herself. Phrases that interrupt the inner critic and help her come back to herself. Not by forcing positivity, not by fixing the moment, but by meeting her where she is. Before we get into the 5, I want to tell you a story. So I've worked with a lot of girls where this has happened, but I worked with a girl in the classroom who most adults would describe as confident, and especially teachers. Like, she would mask in the classroom being completely confident. She did well in school. She followed directions. She raised her hand and she smiled easily. She's one that teachers would say is a top student, is just all around a confident kid. But one afternoon during a quiet writing activity, she froze. And this would happen a lot of times when we would have writing time. She stared at the page, and I think we can all relate to this if you've ever written anything, even in a journal. She erased, she wrote again, she erased harder, and finally, as I was walking by, I noticed and I squatted down beside her just to give her some reassuring presence. And she leaned over to me and whispered, I hate this. I'm bad at everything. And it really stopped me in my tracks because up until that moment, I really did think as well that she was confident in all areas. But I also know, in being a teacher for 23 years in the classroom, that a lot of times, especially high achieving girls, or even ones that appear confident, expect themselves to feel that way for everything in their life. And when something trips them up, or when they have a moment where they don't feel as confident, it can make them feel lost and like they're not really themselves. But nothing about this behavior told that story. Like, on the outside, she, like I said, looked completely confident, but her inner voice was shaking. Girls don't often show self-criticism through meltdowns or tears. Often it shows up as, like I said, perfectionism, harsh self-talk, avoiding things that they care about once they meet some kind of a challenge or they go up to the next level and whatever that would be, or quietly shutting down. And that's why what we say in these moments, why it matters so much. So let's start from the first phrase that she needs to hear from you. And that is, I hear how hard you're being on yourself. So when girls are being self critical, they're usually afraid of one thing: this is just who I am. They're afraid that it's just going to be who they are and there's nothing they can do to change it. And this phrase, by you saying, I see or I hear how hard you're being on yourself, separates your daughter or the girls in your life from the voice she is using with herself. So you're not correcting her, you're not arguing with her, you're noticing the tone. And that can be really hard, especially when you care so much about her. And so here's what this might sound like. For younger girls, if you hear her saying something or you notice she's erasing, and I've even had times where during homework time, there's holes in the paper, things are wadded up. As a teacher, I'd gotten notes from parents that say, I'm sure you're wondering why we're turning something in like this, even though a lot of things are digital today. Whenever, especially with math, whenever you would see like paper, when there was a struggle, I would see a parent who had their daughter turn in the paper, not to embarrass her, but just to show the struggle, like visually, of the eraser marks, or they had to tape the paper, whatever it would be. And so for younger girls, what you can say when you're noticing this self criticism and her really struggling is, wow, that sounds like a really tough voice talking to you right now. So when she's saying something out loud that's very self-critical, you can kind of make it seem like, the voice is away from her. And so it's like, oh, that's a really tough voice talking to you. For older girls, and especially going into that middle school age, and again, these are interchangeable. You can make them your own. These are just examples. But the middle school age is, I hear how hard you're being on yourself about this. So just again, noticing and naming it. Like, I hear you're being hard on yourself. Even no matter what their age, you can just keep it as simple as that. And then for that teen age, you can say, that inner voice sounds pretty harsh today. So naming that it's an inner voice as they get older is definitely appropriate, especially if you've talked about an inner critic. And if you haven't, you can just introduce it in that way. And what this does is incredibly important. It tells her, I see what's happening inside of you, and I'm not scared of it. Because when girls feel corrected too quickly, that inner voice digs in. But when they feel seen, it softens. So sometimes unexpectedly we can say something like, that's not true, and it does the opposite effect. It's like, well, maybe she thinks it is true and she's just saying that to make me feel better. And what I do hear from so many girls is, my parent has to say that because they're my parent. And so they don't often believe it, but when you just name it and you keep it more neutral, it helps her feel more seen. So you might notice when you do something more like, I see that, that voice is really harsh right now, is you might see her shoulders drop. You might see her breathing slow, or her tone change just a bit. And that's your cue that you've created safety. And once she feels seen instead of corrected, her nervous system softens just enough for the next thing she needs from you. The second thing that you can say when you notice that she's being really hard on herself is, that sounds like pressure talking, not the truth about you. So self-criticism is rarely about the moment itself. It's about pressure. And there can be, I've heard a lot of people talk about pressure, and like most of the time we think of pressure as a negative thing, but pressure can also be a positive thing that will push you toward your goals. But in this case, it's more of the negative side. So I don't think all pressure is bad, but in this case, when she is being hard on herself, it's pressure to keep up, pressure to perform, pressure to not disappoint, and pressure to be enough. And girls internalize pressure fast. So the phrase names what's really happening without shaming her. So when you say, that sounds like pressure talking, not the truth about you, or that just sounds like pressure talking, it's naming that she is feeling pressure. And again, it's neutralizing it instead of making her feel like that she's done something wrong, which is never your intention when you talk to her, but it's to support her. But sometimes they can take it in a shaming type of way because they feel shame that they are feeling these things where they know they shouldn't be hard on themselves. And most of the time, especially with perfectionistic girls, the parents are not putting the pressure. It is her putting the pressure on herself. And so, what you might say to a younger girl is sometimes our brains get bossy when they feel pressured. So, again, it's just showing her that, it's her brain getting bossy and not something that she's doing on purpose. For older girls, in that approaching that middle school age, you can say that sounds like pressure talking, not the whole picture. And then for the teens, it's, I don't think that's the truth about you. I think that's stress. So then it's renaming pressure as stress because pressure can create stress. And especially in that teen age, they start to notice and recognize when they're feeling stress. And again, there are times when they're naturally going to feel stress, like before a big game or before a big project or before an end of a grading period. I mean, that's natural pressure and stress that is unavoidable, but it's helping her move through it in a more healthy way and knowing that she can separate herself from the pressure. And that distinction really matters because when girls think their self criticism is truth, that's when they spiral. But when they see it as a response to pressure, they can step back. So that self criticism, we want them to see it more as pressure, not as what's true about them. So this especially is helpful for girls who compare themselves a lot or constantly. That was me as a girl. Like I constantly compared myself socially to other girls or the way they performed in class. And that was because I had a lot of inner chaos and I had a lot of self criticism and negative self-talk. And so that doesn't mean that your daughter has to do it all the time, but if you notice that she does tend to compare or she ties her worth to performance, that's another thing, especially in high achieving girls. Or if she feels like that everyone has it together except for her, like, why am I not getting it? Why am I the one who has to work harder? Why am I the one who fill in the blank? And so when that pressure gets named instead of absorbed, it creates room for learning instead of self-judgment. And then the third thing that you can say to her is, you're allowed to learn, not be perfect. So many girls confuse learning with failing. And that is one of the biggest things, especially like if I think about Girls Positivity Club, anytime we do an art project, which is every club or every camp, like we do art, we do baking and summer camp, we do during clubs, team building, connection type of activities, but also arts and crafts that are related to the lesson because that's what the girls love to do. But it doesn't always go perfectly. And a lot of times they will see it, even if they're not perfectionistic, they'll see it as a fail and they want to start over, especially when we use canvases. There's something about using a canvas that adds like more pressure to what we're doing. And so we don't always use canvases, but sometimes during special projects or tie-dye or something that's a little bigger of a project, they can see it as, if they make a mistake, that it failed and they have to start over or it's ruined and they want to throw it away. So that's why many girls can confuse that as a fail rather than, oh, I'm learning, or I can make something out of this, or I know what to do next time. Especially for girls who care deeply, who try really hard, or who want to do things right. And they think, if I mess up, it means I'm bad at this. And I would hear this a lot in the classroom, like I've said in other episodes, of when we were learning a new concept, especially the second part of the year, because that's typically when all of the new concepts come into play. It's not that it's all review the first half, but it can tend to be just more of a comfort zone. And then, especially in the second part or the end of a school year, is when they might be exposed to some concepts that they've never learned before, especially if they're being pushed. And so, this phrase of you saying you're allowed to learn, not to be perfect. So, you don't have to be perfect. You're not supposed to be perfect at everything. This gives them permission to be human. And I know for myself too, like I still have to remind myself of that when something doesn't go well, of like, okay, what did I learn? It doesn't mean this is a fail, or if it is a fail, I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to get better. And it's not always easy. It doesn't always feel good, but it's important to teach them that young so that when they do make a mistake or when they do have to kind of push through something to learn it, they don't see it as a fail. They see it as something that they're learning along the way to help them get better. And so for younger girls, you can say something like, you're still learning and that's allowed. Like you're supposed to be still learning and that's okay. Or for older girls going into that middle school age, you don't have to get it right the first time to be good at something. And I would see this all the time in the classroom where, again, they thought that if they didn't get it right the first time, and I've even had this with my own teenager, it doesn't mean that you're not ever going to be good at it. It just means you're not good at it automatically. And you're actually not supposed to be good at everything automatically. So you don't have to get it right the first time to be good at something, is a great thing to say. And then for teens, you can say more like, growth doesn't look perfect. It looks messy. And anytime you can also share something about you that has felt messy and that you are growing through it, it helps humanize you and helps her see that even adults, even though, yes, they don't always want like a lot of stories about our lives of where we are now, but it helps still to have those conversations of when either you were her age or now, and to say, this is just part of growing. And no matter how old you are, it's going to feel messy sometimes, and you're going to get through that mess. And that's actually a good thing because that shows that you're learning. This is huge for perfectionistic girls, especially when you can say confidence doesn't mean never messing up. You can add this. It means knowing you're still okay when you do. This is huge for perfectionistic girls when you say that confidence doesn't mean never messing up, because they don't need more encouragement to try harder. They need permission to try imperfectly. And this often is the moment when girls need help changing the voice they use with themselves. So these types of phrases can become that replacement to that inner critic. The fourth phrase that you can say to your daughter when she's being really hard on herself is, let's talk to yourself the way you'd talk to a friend. And I have found this especially helpful when you can name a friend and almost put your friend's or her friend's name in place of how she's talking to herself, and say, what would you say to Emma? What would you say to so and so if she were in this exact place? And what it does is it allows her to separate herself in that moment, because it's really effective. As soon as you do that, it's like a switch and they're able to do it. And then you just say, now do that for yourself, or now say that for yourself. This phrase doesn't just work at every age. I mean, it does work at every age, because girls already know how to be kind to their friends or to people who they care about. And if they don't have a super close friend that they would say these encouraging things to, take a cousin, take a brother, take a whoever it would be, so that they don't just apply this inward. And this, like I said, phrase works at any age. I've tried this with girls at all ages, from 6 all the way to teens and all the way to adults, really. When you ask this question, what would you say if your best friend said this about herself? This helps her translate, I'm terrible at this, to I'm still learning. Or I always mess things up, to I had a hard moment. This always happens to me, to this didn't go the way I'd hoped. You're not forcing positivity, but you are teaching her self-compassion. And that's a skill, not a personality trait. So when you're able to start it with, what would you say to your friend, or what would you say to your cousin, or what would you say to your little sister or brother, it helps her separate it and then go, okay, let's change that. Let's flip it and say, instead of this always happens to me, this didn't go how I'd hoped, but I think next time it could go better, or something like that, like giving herself hope. So that's a skill that's going to take some time, and it's not going to necessarily just magically happen overnight when she says it one time to herself. It's something that you can use each time. And, with all of these things to say to the girls in your life, it may not be the same thing every time, but what I'm hoping that this does is equip you with different things you can try, and different ones are going to work for different moments. And so even if you just choose one to try, and even if it's this one, whatever one is easiest, or whatever one you think will be the best for your daughter, just try them all, but try one at a time and see what seems to help in each situation. Girls who learn this early and know that they can talk to themselves the way they would a best friend, know how to recover instead of beating themselves up with every mistake. And that doesn't mean that she's never going to beat herself up, but when you start teaching her this, she can get out of it quicker. And so once that inner voice softens, perspective becomes possible. And then the fifth phrase that you can use with your daughter when she's being really hard on yourself is, one moment doesn't define who you are. And so self-critical girls tend to make moments bigger than they are. One bad grade can become, I'm dumb, or I'm not good at this anymore. One awkward moment becomes, I'm embarrassing, or I made a fool of myself. One mistake becomes, I always fail. This phrase shrinks the moment back to its true size. And I even heard a mom tell this to her daughter when she had a bad day. It's like, one moment doesn't ruin your entire day. So again, she didn't do it in a way that was like shaming her for saying she had a bad day. But as they were talking about her day, she was like, well, tell me about it. What were the things that made it a bad day? And it really came down to one moment. And so she was like, one moment doesn't define who you are in this day. Like, we can still have a good rest of your day. And so even when you are talking with her and she's telling you about one moment that was embarrassing, or one grade that was bad or hard, and to her a bad grade could be she missed 2 problems if she is a high achiever, or it could be that she failed something. Maybe she failed a test and that happened. And what I always tell them is, one grade doesn't define who you are as a student. One bad test doesn't mean that you're not smart or you're not good at it. It just means that it was hard. And maybe it shows you next time what to study for. Or maybe it was a pop quiz and you just didn't know it yet. And it just showed on that one day what you could do. And so another day will be another day. And so learn from it and just tell yourself that this moment or this test or this part in a game or whatever doesn't define who you are. And so when you say that phrase, the phrase shrinks the moment back to its true size. You can say, this is one moment, not your whole story. This doesn't erase everything you've done well, or you're still you, even on hard days. This helps her build emotional perspective, identity stability. So it's just stabilizing who she is and her identity and who she is as a person. And also resilience. It helps her build resilience and knowing that she can still mess up and keep going. And it reminds her that who she is isn't determined by one tough moment. And so back to the girl I was describing earlier, who during a writing activity was erasing and really struggling in that moment. That day, instead of telling her she was fine, I sat next to her, and I often like to do this as a teacher, is just sit beside them when they were working instead of hovering over them. I sat next to her and said, I hear how hard you're being on yourself. She paused, took a breath, and said, yeah, I guess I am. And that moment mattered, but not because her work changed, not because I said the perfect thing, but because her relationship with herself softened. And by me saying that and noticing that she was being hard on herself, helped her in that moment. And yes, I sat down with her and we brainstormed, and I got her going with her writing, because that's my job, or that was my job as a teacher. And that still is. All of us who want to have positive impact on girls' lives, like, we can still give them the next best step. But I think the entry point is really naming that we're noticing they're being hard on themselves. And that's what these phrases do. They don't erase self-doubt. They teach girls how to meet it with kindness instead of cruelty. And so if your daughter is being hard on herself right now, or if this ever happens, which I think it happens to everybody, here's what I want you to remember. This doesn't mean she lacks confidence. It means she's growing, noticing, and caring. You don't have to silence her inner critic forever. You're teaching her how to respond to it because it is going to come up again. That's part of your brain, is trying to protect yourself. And she, having these things to say to herself, is going to be better equipped to handle those moments when her brain is trying to protect her and keep her safe, and those negative thoughts can creep in. And you don't have to silence that inner critic forever. Like I said, you're teaching her how to respond to it. And that is a powerful, lifelong gift. Your words are becoming her inner voice, even when you don't realize it. And you are doing better than you think. Even if these phrases don't go perfectly, just trying one more than once, or trying it in your own way, is helping you and her way more than you know. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining another empowering episode of the Raising Confident Girls podcast. Share today's insights with caregivers and friends, building beautiful relationships with strong girls. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. We're not just a podcast, we're a community. Follow Girls Positivity Club on social media for more empowering content on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. This podcast empowers you, supporting incredible girls. Let's create strong, beautiful relationships with the girls in our lives. I appreciate you listening today. Stay confident, stay connected. Until next time, keep raising those confident girls. You've got this.